Holst's The Planets consists of 7 movements: Mars, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. As the piece is about astrological signs and not astronomic verisimilitude, Holst did not write a movement entitled Earth. Neither did he compose a movement in honor of Pluto, which is understandable given that Pluto was not discovered until 1930, 14 years after Holst completed The Planets. Pluto's discovery did not trouble Holst at all. Preliminaries continued. Given the planetary titles and subtitles each movement bears, we might think that The Planets is program music, that is, a piece of music that tells some sort of non-musical story. In reality, The Planets is not program music. According to Holst himself, The Planets is a series of, quote, mood pictures, with the movements acting as foils for one another, unquote. Thus, each movement represents the expressive embodiment of the astrological character suggested in its subtitle, and then proceeds as an abstract musical composition. Having said that, The Planets does map an expressive journey from the physical, aggressive, and profligate in the first movement, Mars, to the mystical, passive, and stoic in the final movement, Neptune. One last preliminary. 101 explanations, give or take, have been offered for the ordering of the movements in the planets, an ordering that does not correspond with the physical order of the planets in the solar system. Holst's order starts with the 4th rock from the Sun and moves inwards, Mars, Venus, and Mercury, and only then moves outwards, from Jupiter to Saturn to Uranus, and finally to Neptune. There are 2 explanations for Holst's ordering, one astrological and the other musical. In astrology, each planet rules over a particular sign of the zodiac. The first astrological sign in the zodiac, the beginning of which corresponds with the vernal equinox, the first day of spring, is Aries. The ruling planet of Aries is Mars. The second sign of the zodiac is Taurus. Taurus's ruling planet is Venus. The third sign is Gemini. Gemini's ruling planet is Mercury. Thus, the ruling planets of the first 3 signs of the zodiac, Mars, Venus, and Mercury, correspond with the first 3 movements of Holst's The Planets. Likewise, the last 4 signs of the zodiac, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, are ruled by the planets that correspond to the last 4 movements, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Thus, Holst's ordering of his planets makes perfect zodiacal sense. And you know what? Even if it didn't make perfect zodiacal sense, Holst's ordering makes perfect artistic sense. Holst chose to traverse a particular expressive distance, from Mars to Neptune, from the bringer of war to the mystic, from the violent to the ineffable. Our listening will focus on identifying 2 aspects of each movement. First, each movement's major themes, and second, the manner in which each movement personifies the astrological character described in its subtitle. Mars, the bringer of war. The first complete public performance of The Planets occurred in London on November 15, 1920, 2 years and 4 days after the signing of the armistice that brought an end to the First World War. For an English population physically, spiritually, and economically devastated by the war, this first movement, Mars, seemed to reflect perfectly the communal horror through which it had so recently passed. Nevertheless, Holst insisted that Mars had been completed before the outbreak of the war in August of 1914. My friends, you know, if the man had had even an ounce of huckster in him, he could have claimed that not just Mars, but all of the planets had been inspired by the war to end all wars. But that just wasn't Holst's style. An honest man can sometimes be a publicist's nightmare. The throbbing spectral opening of Mars has the repetitive rhythmic pattern and momentum of an infernal bolero, though instead of being set in groups of 3 beats, as a bolero would, this one scuttles along in groups of 5 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Riding atop the wave of this repeated rhythmic pattern are 3 distinct themes. These themes are presented back to back during the first half of the movement. All 3 of these themes grow out of the interval of a falling semitone. A semitone is the smallest interval, the smallest distance between pitches in the equal tempered tuning system. On a piano keyboard, for example, a semitone is the distance between a black key and the white key immediately above or below it. For example, the first of Holst's semitone-generated themes features a series of falling semitones, each one higher than the last. It sounds like this. The second of Holst's semitone-generated themes follows immediately in the brass. The third of Holst's semitone-generated themes, a bugle call-like melody heard initially in a tenor tuba, immediately follows. The presentation of the themes, takes up the first half of the movement, which is set off from what follows by the low, spine-tingling dissonance that concluded that last excerpt. The remainder of the movement consists of a series of free variations of the themes, which leads to a terrifying climax built from sustained harmonies played fortissimo, which is notated with 4 Fs. Finally, the movement concludes with a vicious, bone-rattling coda. As its title, Mars, the Bringer of War, indicates, this movement is about the destructive nature of Mars himself. As the gods were created in our own image, this vicious, militant music becomes a metaphor for humanity's own darkest side, the Darth Vader that lurks somewhere within all of us.